This is how the admins fix the economy. You remember a few months ago when everything was going up in price by millions of coins every single day? This huge bout of inflation saw items like recombobulators peak at a whopping 17 million coins, over 10 million more than today's current price. Other items such as booster cookies were also massively affected, almost peaking at 11 million coins, considering today's value is around about 7 million coins give or take. Kind of crazy. However, this was the reality. People who had a lot of the net worth in coins were seeing the coins become less valuable day by day, hour by hour. And for those people with assets rather than coins, you could observe your net worth going up by hundreds of million coins every single day. This palaver was partially down to a humongous macroing problem on the garden, which would be later, well, I'd say fixed, but not really fixed. There was later changes implemented to try and stop people from macroing. At the end of the day, they always find a way. The sheer amount of people farming because of how accessible it is, I guess probably a proportion of people macroing and just your regular player, contributed towards an insane amount of inflation. The Garden 1.5 update saw farming become way more profitable, increasing the sell value of farming crops to the NPCs. Of course, when you sell something to an NPC, the item disappears and you get coins. Those coins are basically created out of thin air. And it could only really be comparable to in real life when governments start to print money because, well, they just don't have enough. And of course, if you print money more than you already have, you're basically just decreasing the value of that money. It just contributes to a massive amount of inflation, and in real life when countries do this, it never ends well. And the reason why this was happening is because the sell value of these crops to the NPC was actually more than it was to the bazaar. Of course, why would you sell to the bazaar if you could actually sell it to the NPC and gain more coins? And realistically, the Garden 1.5 update was the catalyst for this huge bout of inflation that we actually incurred. Before we do go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS. It gets yourself 50% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel, become part of the 26%. My Discord server is linked in the description of every single video, so you should join. You might think, well, how does that translate into the prices of things like recombobulators? They were obviously 10 million coins more expensive, booster cookies and everything else. Bear in mind the scrolls to put on Hyperions were over 500 million coins and virtually non-obtainable from the bazaar because that was the cap. Items like the Hyperions sold to a massive 2.5 billion coins, some cases even more. Day by day, people who were grinding for items like this found themselves further and further away. Considering the Hyperion is a weapon that unlocks a lot of content once you obtain it, it wasn't great. The thing is, these scrolls were never supposed to be anywhere near as expensive as they are today, or they were at one point. Back in the day, each scroll was like 2 million coins. People thought it was expensive when they went up to like 20 to 30 mil. Now, the issue with these scrolls at that point is basically they weren't actually that much easier to drop than a Necron's handle itself. And at that time, with Necron's handles between 7 to 800 million coins, it didn't really make any sense for the scrolls to be so cheap. This, combined with less and less people actually playing dungeons, led to a bit of a deadly combination. A lot of people took to farming because it was a consistent method to make a lot of coins, and it was really easy to do. With less and less people playing dungeons and more people farming, items like the recombobulator, which is dropped from dungeons, the scrolls, and of course the handle as well, just continue to grow in price. Of course the handle nowhere near as the rate of these 3 scrolls. It was absolutely ridiculous. When people saw them increasing in price by literally like 20, 30, 40 million coins every day, people just invested, making the problem even worse, taking more and more of these items out of the economy. A lot of people invested a ton of coins into recombobulators, booster cookies, and pretty much any commodity that seemed to be going up in value. Of course, you wouldn't want to be left behind with your coins just sitting there devaluing second by second. However, unbeknownst to everyone, this was just making the issue of inflation even worse. Now at this point, the RNG meter worked a little differently to how it should have worked. For instance, if you were doing Zombie Slayer and you had your RNG meter set to a Warden Heart, if you then dropped a Warden Heart before meter, it will then reset the meter if you have the meter applied. Of course, the further you get through the meter, the higher chances of actually dropping the item gets, which understandably makes it pretty advantageous to actually have the meter on. However, if you don't have the meter on, then the meter doesn't reset. But this wasn't actually the case within dungeons, which means essentially if you wanted to drop a Necron's handle, the best way to do it would be to almost fill the meter, And then every time you got close to filling the meter, just take something like a recombobulator and it'll take some of the dungeon score off, so you'll actually be slightly further away from the meter, but still be very close, having an increased chance. The meter wouldn't reset unless you actually fully filled the meter, meaning that people would just sit there with a really high chance of dropping a Necron's handle and then keep resetting the meter down to like 20k off every time they got close, meaning that they just dropped a ton of Necron's handles. Considering at the time there was a massive issue with the price of the Hyperion and how high it was, this kind of just, like I said before, added fuel to the fire, increasing the price of the Necron's handle even more, making it even more rare to drop. But like with anything, something had to give. And it was admin intervention. First of all, the prices of crops selling to the NPC were reduced, which then basically incentivized people selling the crops to the bazaar, hence decrease in inflation. The idea behind this with people selling to the bazaar is less people then sell to the NPC, therefore not devaluating the actual value of coins. And in today's economy, taking a look at the prices on the bazaar and comparing them to the NPC, this change definitely worked. They also increased the chances of dropping a recombobulator, a Necron's handle, and the scrolls, which was a massive help too. Even today, it looks like most scrolls have actually reduced in price by around about 100 to 150 mil since that event. So that's a substantial step. But are these scrolls still too expensive? Let me know. Now, as for the recombobulator, this made it way easier to drop, and pretty much in all floors too, which was definitely a needed change. They also buffed all katanas, including the Atom Split Katana, which is, well, what should be the best weapon to use in terms of Void Gloom Slayer. Now you might think, well, how would this help curb inflation? Well, the Atom Split Katana has always been strong in terms of Void Gloom Slayer. Of course it would be, considering it is literally a dedicated weapon to that Slayer. However, a lot of people opted for the Hype Mage route, obviously using a Hyperion to do Void Gloom Slayers, and a lot of people did that. By buffing this weapon, it provided a much cheaper alternative to using a Hyperion, therefore slightly decreasing the demand for the Hyperion, which is actually really smart. However, what I will say is a fully scrolled Hyperion is still worth over 2 billion coins. And to be honest, it probably peaked at around 2.4, 2.5, maybe slightly more. Definitely decreased the price a little bit, but I'm not sure how effective that really was. It's crazy to think that all of these shenanigans were going on literally 2 months ago, and for the most part, these problems have been fixed. But what do you think? Have the admin's actions actually quote-unquote fixed the economy, or not? If you did enjoy today's video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.